Today's guest is Brian Mavis, and I'm glad to welcome him back to the Delay The Decay podcast for a second time. Brian is the founder of America's Kids Belong, a national nonprofit serving kids in foster care, and he's spent years building movements, ministries, and practical solutions for vulnerable children and families. He's also authored the book Go Upstream, which can be found on Amazon. Brian and his wife Julie are coming up on 35 years of marriage, and today we'll be exploring a passion project for Brian that has particular relevance this Holy Week leading up to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Brian, my friend, welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, so glad to have you again. Thanks for saying yes. And
yeah, of course.
This is going to be a little bit different episode, as you and I have talked. We're going to be talking about the Shroud of Turin. Mm-hmm. Is that how you say it, Turin or Turin?
Yeah. If you're Italian, Turin.
Turin,
right?
The Shroud of Turin. Yes.
There you go.
So I'll be Italian today. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's got particular relevance and significance as we enter into this Holy Week and we ponder the life and the brutal death of Jesus and his victorious resurrection. So I anticipate the Lord using this in my life and in the life of the audience as well. I start all these podcasts off with the same question. That is, what's one habit, Brian, or discipline that you've incorporated into your life recently to help you move upwards and to the right?
Yeah, about 4 months ago, I had done some research. Your audience wouldn't know, but I do have heart issues. I've got a stent, and last time they went in and did an angiogram on me, checked. All my arteries are at least 40% have blockage, and so I started doing a little research about that and discovered that in Norway. They have done a 20-year long-term many people study on the effects of hot saunas.
Are these many people, like short people, or
many people? Many. They're all under 3 foot tall.
Okay.
Yeah. So MANY.
Yes.
And they showed that if you are sitting, being in a hot sauna that is like at least 190 degrees.
Wow.
And you're in there for 20 minutes for 4 times a week, that you reduce your risk of a fatal heart attack by half.
That is compelling. Wow.
And all-cause mortality. Like it even has evidence of cognitive benefits, things like that. So about 4 months ago, I started doing a dry hot sauna, doing that very thing. I go at least 4 times a week. I love it. I get a great, you get a great sweat out of it. Your heart rate goes up. It's like it mimics aerobic exercise. And the other thing it does for me is I work out. And sometimes I just don't have the energy. I don't feel like working out, but I have never yet felt like I don't want to go to the sauna. Mm-hmm. So I go, normally I'll work out and then do the sauna, but there'll be times where it's like, I don't want to work out. Then I'll go to the sauna. It'll get my heart rate up. I'll get a good sweat going. It's like, all right, I'm ready to pump some,
ready to roll.
Weight. Yeah. So that has been great. I love it.
What has the cardiologist said? Have they noticed a difference at all? And
I just, you don't know this, but just like 3 days ago, I did a nuclear stress test, and that's where they do you put a little nuclear dose in you, and they take a before picture of you resting, and then you get on a treadmill, and they get your heart rate up, and then do another picture, and I came out looking great. And in fact, they even had trouble getting my heart rate up high. They're like, they pointed out, they said, you had to work way harder than normal to get your heart rate up. It just, it's like, which is a sign of a healthy heart, and that you got,
Yes.
And so yeah.
That's great.
So,
I'm sorry you've gone through that. I did not know that, but I'm just thrilled that you found something that's helping you.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and it's if that study, Norway study, is accurate, it's more effective than any of the meds I'm on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Is it infrared? Do you mind me asking? Infrared sauna or just dry heat?
it's like the traditional dry sauna where they got the stones and the stones get really hot and then you can put a little water on there. But and it's nice to get it steamy, but you don't want it too steamy. You really want the real heat to get into your core more than just on your skin.
Yeah. So this, I will appreciate what I'm going to say probably more than my audience will because they don't know you the way that I know you. They're going to know you better at the end of this episode. But when you said I decided to start doing some research, I went, of course he did. Like Brian is one of the most curious human beings on the planet. That when he sets his mind to learning about something or solving a problem, it's going to be exhaustive. And I love that about you, Brian. Of course.
I've told my wife, I said, I'm curious about everything, even things I'm not interested in.
That's awesome. All right, well, here we go. We're going to talk today about the Shroud of Turin.
Yes.
And for starters, let's start at the very beginning. What is a shroud?
Yeah, that's a great question because when I've presented this to, and I haven't done a lot of presentations, but a few hundred people have heard it. And when I asked just right off the bat, like anybody heard of this, about a third maybe kind of raise their hand and sheepishly, like they know something, they've heard of it. So first of all, a shroud. What is a shroud? A shroud is a burial cloth, and and Turin is a city in Italy. And you put that together, there is a particular burial cloth that goes currently by the name of the Shroud of Turin. There's a shroud burial cloth in Turin, Italy. It's been there about 450 years. Before then, it was in France. But its dimensions are about 14 and a half feet long. It's about 3.5 feet wide. It's made of linen, and it has the reason it's famous is some people believe it's the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, and some people think it's a medieval forgery.
Okay, well we're gonna dive into that, into your research and where you are at with your understanding and your belief on on this particular shroud.
Yeah.
Was it a first century thing? Was it that I think of the story of Lazarus. What was that a shroud that he walked out in?
Yeah. So he also would have been buried in the Jewish funerary customs, and so something very very similar.
Okay, and so people were standard. It was standard that they were buried in a
covered in a cloth, and then they could have had some other bandages around them. Like for example, when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, after he comes out of the tomb, Jesus says to the people are standing by, unbound him. So, but it wasn't. It's what I don't want people to imagine is a strip of cloth wrapped around like a mummy. That's not what it is. It's like a bed. It's more like a bed sheet.
Okay, thanks for that because I think most of us do picture that.
Yeah, that's not how ancient Jews did it.
Okay,
it's how the Egyptians did it.
Okay, why does this particular burial cloth? Why has it captured the imagination of so many people?
Well, yeah, you said, some people, lots of people, I should say, think it's the burial cloth of Jesus, and some of those people are really smart people. They are scientists, but the reason they think it is not only does it have forensic evidence of a crucified man through the scourging and blood marks around the wrists and the feet and stuff. It has a mysterious image of a man imprinted on it, impressed upon it, and there is no current explanation as to how that image got there. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but so, a lot of people who don't know much about it just assume it's painted on or something like that. And it's been proven that there is no paint or pigment or dyes or anything like that on it.
Mm-hmm. But before we get into some of those scientific discoveries, what were you when you first heard of it? Were you skeptical, or were you like all in on day one?
No, okay, so it's been around, and I first you kind of like when you first hear about something, it was like I think I was like 17, 18, something like that. And it was like, oh, there's this thing called the Shroud of Turin. And already by that time, I was just by how God had wired me, skeptical of everything, and very much approve it to me kind of guy. But this, I didn't even give it a chance. I wasn't just a skeptic. I was a cynic, and I was like, golly, I mean, these religious people and their appetite for relics and something mysterious, miraculous. They're just so gullible, and it's embarrassing. If you're trying to promote the cause of Christ, this is not the way to do it. And then in 1988, there was probably, if anybody knows anything about the Shroud of Turin, they know about this. In 1988, a carbon-14 radiocarbon-14 testing was done to see how old the cloth was, and it was dated between 1260 and 1390, a medieval relic. And when that came out, it came out in news worldwide. The shroud is fake. It confirmed for me what I had already had determined for myself without any evidence, but just assumed it was the case. This was a fake. So when it came out, I was like, well, I knew that already. I mean, I'm just, I'm right again. And so lost all curiosity about the shroud. And if anybody had said anything about it, like they think it's the real deal, I just have to bite my tongue and try not to roll my eyes in their face. And I would kind of be judging them like, gosh, you're just gullible, and it's kind of embarrassing that you believe something like that.
Brian, you have been a pastor. You have a deep faith in the risen Jesus.
Yep.
If somebody were to do a maybe internet search on you, they may not see this fact, but I think someday they will. So you're a Bible scholar. You have a particular passion and interest in biblical theology. You believe that the Word of God is infallible.
Yep.
And so, I wanted to just state that because, you're not a unlearned Bible's the secondary thing, and let's go look for things that that might prove that Jesus was really who he said he was.
No, yeah, scripture first. Yeah, I have an MA, a master's in theology. But I've learned a lot more since then, and I say my hobby is studying scripture. I love it.
I love that you love it, because you've been an encouragement to me over the years. So being a skeptic and then maybe a cynic, what caused you to start looking at and studying the Shroud more seriously?
Right. So for almost 40 years, I said I had no curiosity about it at all, and was convinced it's just a forgery. And then there are people of weak faith who need little props like this to help up their faith. And I will say that I can't remember, it was like 10 years ago or something, and just kind of out there in the Ethernet, I heard or read or something just came across my ears or eyes that said that pollen was on the Shroud of Turin that was exclusive to Jerusalem in the spring months. And I, for a moment, thought, well, that's weird. That's weird that a medieval French forger would go through the trouble of going to the Middle East, Jerusalem, in April to get microscopic pollen to put on the cloth to be discovered hundreds of years later when we invent microscopes. And then I just lost curiosity, like within minutes, and just thought, that's just noise, and moved on. And then a couple of years ago, I have a friend who just was doing just a little video on the Shroud of Turin. And I was like, gosh, why do I have friends like this? And I thought, okay, he promoted it, and I thought, I don't want to watch this, but I want to be a good friend, support my friend, and say, hey, I saw your video. So I watched it. And again, it was short, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And as I'm watching it, there were a few things in it. I was like, I did not know that. I didn't know that either. And there were a few things that just, I thought, I don't know this like I thought I did. And I thought, and it just cracked the door just wide enough that I thought, I'm going to look into this because it's a little fishy and I don't know. And I can imagine I can shoot this down fast enough. And so I got curious, and you know how that goes. You just start discovering things. I started reading, academic journals, and then started ordering books and watching videos and searches online. And what's a little bit tough is, and it might be surprising to people, the Shroud of Turin fits under the science of archaeology, and it's the most studied and written about archaeological relic in the world. And it's also known to be the most lied about relic in the world. And people lie about it on both sides. There are people who are for it, and they make up stuff about it that's not true in order to try to make it seem more plausible. And there's people on the other side who say stuff that's not true to deny its authenticity. So you got to kind of, get through a lot of junk to figure what's what. But so what happened for me was, I'm studying it hours every night. And one night, so my wife and I usually head towards bed about the same time, but during this time frame, she was like, I guess I'm going to go to bed, good luck, see you in a few hours. And I would be downstairs, and I have all this stuff, all these papers and books and things laid out on my couch, and I would sit on the couch and then on the floor. And I like seeing many things at the same time. And so a couple months into it, I've been doing hours, thousands of pages of reading. And on this particular night, I'm staring at a picture of the frontal image of the man on the shroud. You can see that he is he's nude, and he has scourge wounds all over him. And just looking at the scourge wounds and knowing already, that these wounds throughout his body were the same depth forensically. They know that the wounds were the same depth from head to toe, meaning that around his pelvic region and his buttocks, that this man was scourged, and he was scourged nude, and almost certainly was crucified nude because he was buried nude, and they wouldn't have disrobed him. And so at that moment, I had my guard down, and I just started getting overwhelmed by the shame of the cross, and what the shame that Jesus was willing to go through for us, and also thinking back to the original shame of nakedness in Genesis 3, and Jesus taking on that shame, and the love of Christ just what broke through to me. And I mean, again, I already believed in the resurrection, I mean, in the crucifixion and Jesus' love for me, but it had a special impact that ended up piercing my heart, and I still wasn't convinced that it was authentic, and so I just wept. I wept and wept, and then even thinking about it now, gosh, it was just so emotionally impactful. It wasn't until later, weeks, months, I'm not even sure, that I was then finally admitting to myself intellectually, it was like, I think this thing that I have made fun of for 40 years is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus. And and then I was embarrassed that I believed that. And so a couple of weeks later, we had some friends over, 4 couples, all with ministry backgrounds, and that night we're hosting dinner, and then the boys and girls, we all break up into separate rooms, and my guy friends were just we're catching up with each other, and one of them asked, "Hey Brian, what's new with you?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, here we go." And I felt like I'm coming out of the shroud closet. And I said, I want you guys to know that I've been studying something, and I'm hesitant to share with you what it is. And I don't want you to think, I'm an idiot. And they're like, come on already. And I was like, okay, I can't believe that I believe what I believe. But I think the Shroud of Turin is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus. And they were all just poker faced. I couldn't tell if they even knew what it was, or if they were like, well, of course, or like, you are gullible. But to their credit, they're like, well, tell us more. And so for the next half hour, I just kind of just went on and just said, here's what I'm learning. And about a half hour later, one of them said, we haven't seen you this animated about something in years. Like, you're so passionate about it. We really want to encourage you to keep going into it. So I've kept learning. And in fact, I've now attend a post-grad seminary that's based out of Rome. I attend online. Unfortunately, they don't require me to attend it in person. But yeah, 22 credit hours, and about 3/4 of the way through that, where we're getting the top experts in chemistry, physics, fabrics, history, statistics, to share the truth and the evidence about the shroud. And they're very measured. They're like, here's the facts. You decide for yourself.
Brian, why do you feel like so many Christians, myself in that same category, our initial response is skepticism and maybe being cynical? Is that all bad? And yeah, just walk me through that.
Well, yeah. So I mean, you're describing me. So I could say, for me, there was a couple things. One is, I didn't want to be duped. I mean, well, okay, I had my faith in Christ and in His death and resurrection is a historical one based on the reliability of the Scriptures. I believe it records faithfully his death, burial, and resurrection, and that's all I needed. I didn't need more than that. And when I found out about the shroud, I was like, I don't want to need this prop to rely on. Because I mean, first of all, there were a lot of forgeries and stuff. I mean, if pieces of the cross, and there's something like 7 authentic crowns of thorns. Well, it's like, only 6 of them for sure are fake, and probably all 7. So it was like it's got to be a fake. And with the carbon 14 dating, it was like, yeah, it's confirmed to be middle age, so it can't be Christ's authentic burial cloth. And if you say that it is, and you don't know what you're talking about, then people who don't believe in Christ or are seeking will think, well, if you believe in that, and then you say the scriptures are also reliable and authentic, then you have no credibility, because I know that's not authentic. So the scriptures probably aren't either. And so I just didn't want to come off as looking like a gullible fool, which would then harm the cause of Christ.
Thanks for that, Brian. Yeah, there's probably a healthy level of being skeptical, but I feel like oftentimes we shut the door on curiosity and learning.
I sure did.
And research. I know I've done that many times. Of all the evidence that changed your mind, historical, scientific, forensic claims, what moved the needle most for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And for me, and I've thought, like, was there this one thing? It wasn't one thing. So the answer was the cumulative case.
Okay.
It was like, gosh, it's not okay. This is adding up, but also so is this. This is adding up. Let's put this in the positive ledger, and now this one, and now this one. And it was like, gosh, the accumulation of evidence is what's so convincing. You've got evidence that is chemical, evidence that is historical, evidence that is has to do with physics, evidence that has to do with Jewish funerary customs, evidence from the scriptures that all line up. And it was like, man, this is tough to just dismiss when so many things are lining up on one side.
So, what was fallible about the carbon testing that
Yeah. So that's again, that was the thing. Like I said, for me, just shut the door on all my curiosity for 4 decades. And so what happened was, well, first of all, it's important for our listeners to know that in 1977, 30 scientists were allowed direct access to the Shroud for 120 straight hours. And it was led by an American scientist in Colorado Springs who was a physicist. And in that group were Jews and atheists. In fact, some of them admitted that they felt like the assignment was go to Turin, study the Shroud for 120 straight hours, and here's the assignment: tell us how it was made.
So this wasn't a religious expedition; it was a scientific
one.
Yeah.
And the only time it's ever been done. And so so they prepared for it for 2 years. They went with thousands of pounds of equipment that was shipped over, and had everything thought out. And like I said, admittedly, some of them admitted that they thought they would have it figured out in a few hours, and then they would have 4.5 days to party in Italy. And they're like 120 hours goes by. They come back. For the next 2 years, their different disciplines are all writing papers about what their part of it was. And then after 2 years, they finally said, we have to come out with an official statement. And the statement was, we don't know. We don't know how this thing was made. And they did know that there was real blood on it, but they said they just didn't know how this mysterious image was made. And so then the reason they didn't do carbon-14 test dating on it during that time is because the technology hadn't come along far enough without destroying too much of it. But 10 years later, they did have. And so the idea was that there was this agreed upon protocol that they would take pieces from 7 different areas of the cloth, and then they would send those to 7 different laboratories to test the date of it. Well, when it came down to it, like it just kind of happened all at once, where they decided at the last minute, let's not let these four universities do it. Let's narrow it down to 3 and laboratories who will do it, and let's only take it from one area. And they took it from an area that these scientists before said, we already know that this area, which would have been down by his right foot, the corner of the shroud, it seems compromised. When we do different kinds of photos around it, it shows up as a different color. And, we know it was handled a lot. It's gone through fires. There's something anomalous about this particular portion of the shroud. But that's where they took it from. This little piece that they cut in half and then cut that half into 3 pieces and gave it to 3 universities. Okay. Then it comes out that it was dated between 1260 and 1390, but they wouldn't release the raw data. And they're like, and it's like doing your homework and you give the teacher, you're like, here's my answer.
Right.
And they're like, can we see your work? And you're like, no.
Are you reading my transcripts, Brian?
What's that?
Are you reading my transcripts when I was in high school?
Just trust me. I figured that out in my gut. And so the first problem was that they disregarded what agreed upon protocol, that they most substantially took it only from one area that already scientists had said this area was anomalous. And that thirdly, they would not show the raw statistical data. It wasn't until just a few years ago that an Italian lawyer used the Freedom of Information Act to get the that raw data from Oxford. And when it came out, the statisticians took a look at it and they said, this doesn't pass muster. It is too heterodox. I mean, the numbers are all over the place. And so the statistics alone, they said, wouldn't be reliable. So it had 3 huge strikes against it. And now credible scientists are saying that dating is not the knockout punch everybody thought it was. And in fact, we think it's severely compromised.
Wow. And that happened in 78 or a few years
So
after
that happened in 88.
Okay. Yeah.
And and I said the protocol, we already knew the protocol was wrong. Taking it from only one place was wrong. And that was in 88. But it was just a few years ago, about 5-6 years ago, where the Freedom of Information Act was used to actually see the statistics based behind the science. And statisticians said, this is bad science.
What are the strongest objections that people raise against the shroud's authenticity?
Yeah, so that still would be one. There'd be people who would still say, the carbon-14 test is still the gold standard, and we believe it still. And the other one would be that back in the late, almost 1400, around 1390, if I'm remembering the date right, there was a Catholic bishop who said that he met a man who knew an artist who said that he painted it, and that from that historical moment, people say, well, there's somebody from way back when who said they know that it was forged. So that has some problems with it. One, because when the 1977 group of scientists came in with microscopes and all sorts of chemistry, they said, there's no paint on this thing. This was not painted. So the science is against this guy's statement. There's other problems as far as too is there's really no record of who this person is that he talked to supposedly, or the forger. Like there's no names given.
Okay.
When he does mention it, the person who had jurisdiction over this site over the shroud said, I don't really think you're telling the truth. So,
Yeah.
but people, here's a way I want to say it. Why people hold on to that is, first of all, you got to understand that, and you and I and everybody, we have cognitive bias. I mean, we have confirmation bias. There are things that we want to be true,
Yeah.
and so now, when I was first studying the Shroud, I didn't want it to be true because I was like, I've been wrong for 40 years. And it changed my mind from from not thinking it was true to being true. But there are many, many, many people, of course, who believe in Jesus and they want this to be true. And, they love Jesus. They think this would be an amazing thing if it were real. And so they want it. They want it to be true. That's their bias. But here's the other side. There's people who don't just want it to be false. They need it to be false. Because if it's the real deal, it is physical, material, empirical, current evidence, forensic evidence of a crucifixion, death, burial, and a mysterious image that hints towards, more than hints towards, a resurrection. They can't have that be true. So they have a lot of motivation. They need it to be false. And so there are people who go to extreme lengths to do whatever they can to try to dismiss it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. We talked about that the other day, that those who have yet to believe that Jesus, who he said he was, the Messiah, the risen Jesus, that if they believe that this shroud was true, they would have to reorient their life around this resurrected.
If they claim to be people of integrity and intellectual integrity, and you're like, hey, I'm just going to go to where the evidence leads. Yeah, it would rock their world because they'd have to change their world. They'd have to. I mean, they're like, oh, Jesus is, the resurrected, living God, and what am I going to do about it?
Why should Christians care? Why somebody's listening? They've not even thought of it. They've heard of the shroud. Maybe read an article along the way. They dismissed it like you. Why might they care, and why might they increase their curiosity?
Yeah, I would say for me, two main reasons: head and heart. There are people out there like me who have the kind of this prove it to me. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be fooled by other people or my own desires. And I want evidence that points to my faith. And I don't want to say, well, I have faith in spite of the evidence. I want to have faith because of the evidence. And so for me, it strengthened my faith in the resurrection, that there is forensic, tangible, empirical evidence for it. And I think that has incredible power for the seeker who is like, gosh, I don't know if I can believe in the reliability of Scripture. I believe in science. And it's like, okay, well, take a look at this. Or for not just the seeker, but the skeptics, who are like, well, you got to, what are you going to do about this evidence, this material evidence of a crime scene? It looks like we know who done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the heart side, and that was, again, unlike anything else. Usually it's like you start with your head and then it sinks to your heart. This went the opposite for me. It pierced my heart. It made the reality of Jesus' crucifixion. I mean, of course, I already believed in it, but it had a special emotive penetration of like, this isn't just a belief or a doctrine. I mean, this is reality. This was Christ's love for the world. Yeah. And so I believe the shroud is a mirror of the gospel. And just like the gospels were written on papyrus, on paper and ink. The shroud is the gospel written in blood and light, and it's a mirror of the gospel. As it's been referred to as the fifth gospel, or it could be the first because it was the only one that was there at the resurrection.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's powerful. Again, it deepened my faith. It deepened my love for God. And when I, like I said, I didn't just say, "Oh, that's cool." I wept.
To tie the shroud back into the biblical account of the resurrection, you had talked to me about that the other day, and I thought that it was really helpful to me to hear about what is included in all four Gospels and what isn't included in all four Gospels. Not that it has to be in all four Gospels to be true.
No.
They're different accounts.
Yeah. So, for our listeners, you're not aware. I mean, there are four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the kind of real simply can be put as these are kind of the biographies of Jesus. Not exactly correct, but close enough. And if you had four biographies about Abraham Lincoln, there would be different things in them. So the four Gospels, rarely do they all four talk about the same thing in the same way. Three of the four might, two of the four, one. But for example, the most important week is this Passion Week of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And only three of the four mention that Jesus had a crown of thorns. Not all four mentioned, just three of the four. Only three of the four mentioned the scourging. Not all four. Only one mentions the nail-pierced hands, and that's inferred because of Thomas wanting to investigate after the resurrection Jesus' wounds. Only one mentions the spear wound. And so what's amazing, though, is all four of them stop and point out that Jesus was buried with this cloth, with this, what looks like a bed sheet almost, this shroud over him. And they all pause there. And John, who was the eyewitness to not just the crucifixion, but then actually went into the tomb, he really stops and says, he points out that he sees this cloth, and because he sees it, there's something in him, and he says, because of what I've seen, what I've witnessed, that he saw and believed. That's the exact line. He says, I saw and believed. And then the very next thing is, he said, the disciples didn't understand that Jesus was supposed to rise from the dead from the scriptures. So John first believed in the resurrection because of the shroud, not because of the scriptures. It was tangible evidence. And a lot of times people, they give doubting Thomas, even that nickname, a disparaging idea of he had to have visual proof before he believed. He's kind of the villain of the. It's what? John also had believed because of something that he saw, something that was tangible, forensic, and so it happened to be this cloth. And so scriptures point out hey, it's not just the empty tomb. It wasn't just what was absent. It was what was present that helped change their minds.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Brian. We're going to wrap it up here in just a couple of minutes. And then for the audience, I don't know when you're listening to this. It might be after Holy Week, but we'll be recording a webinar on the Tuesday of Passion Week. And my hope is that by wherever you're listening or listening or watching this, that there'll be a link to that webinar that will live with this podcast, and it'll have slides. It'll be Brian will go into more depth on that as well.
Yeah, more of the forensics. I'd like to do a chronology of okay, let's look at the scourging, and then the crown of thorns, and then the crucifixion, and then the side wound, and then the face cloth. That's a whole nother thing. That's amazing. There'll be more of a forensic kind of presentation.
Looking forward to that. You were moved earlier on in this podcast, and you were moved when you first came to the understanding that Jesus was not just buried naked, but he was hung on the cross naked. Why does that move you so?
I think, whenever we see images of Jesus, I think appropriately so, he's covered, with some sort of loincloth, something to cover his mid region. To see the historical reality of it, though, was like, it just, and have it, to me at least, tied back to what was in Genesis 3 when Adam and Eve sinned, their first realization, their first horrible moment was this feeling of awareness that they were naked, and they were shamed to be seen, to be so exposed. And the Bible, New Testament, talks about Jesus, his willingness to face the shame of the cross. I always thought that, I always just took it very spiritually. Like, having sin placed on him, that's a shame. It was just so human. Like the part of the deal of the cross wasn't just torture and death. It was humiliation. And to have God say, I'm willing to be humiliated for you, and to identify with being filled with shame, in order that can take your shame away. It just deepened my awareness of his love for us, that he was willing to bear that, endure that, go through that, because he loves you.
Yeah, amen. Brian, you are characterized by curiosity and research. You're not a judgmental person. I've never known you to be judgmental in any way. How would you encourage my audience, at the end of the day, what next step would you encourage the Delay The Decay audience to take regarding the Shroud?
Yeah, it's that old famous Ted Lasso episode and moment where he's at the dartboard and he says, he quotes, who was it? Emerson? I forget who it was, but he says, don't be judgmental, and be curious. And I was judgmental for 40 years against. Like I said, I'm not a judgmental person, but I was on this archaeological object. I was just dismissed. I was prejudiced against it, and I was judgmental. And when I allowed myself to say, okay, let's get curious for a moment and just follow the evidence and see where it leads, it changed my mind, and it changed me. It changed my heart, and it's deepened my faith. I've presented it to, I said, several hundred people. Those people have become fascinated. Okay, let me say one more thing.
Please.
Like, just imagine, and I have never said it this way before, so I'm not sure if this is going to resonate. Imagine that the glaciers on Mount Ararat melt enough that all of a sudden we start seeing evidence of a big old boat on top of there. And you're like, holy cow, it's Noah's Ark. That would rock the world. And I think we have something far more significant than that. We have a piece of cloth that has it recorded the death, burial, and resurrection of God.
Of God.
And if it's real, if it's authentic, again, if it's found fake to be fake, somehow proven to be found, I'd be like, okay, I believe in the resurrection anyway, and the death. I don't need it. But the evidence has led me to think it's authentic, and to think, hey, here is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, and I'm just sneering at it. I was like, it deserves I mean, it deserves more than that. It deserves more than a sneer. It's still unexplained to this day by science. It cannot be recreated.
That's amazing. Well, Brian, it's I think this is the third time I've heard you talk about it, and my curiosity has peaked. Not peaked as there's no more, but it's it's peaking.
Yeah.
It's moving, and so I thank you for that. And my desire through this interview is that those that are listening that already believe that Jesus is alive, that this would somehow like strengthen and deepen your faith in Jesus and your desire to follow him, and also to know that he is not just a fable, but he's alive and he is active and in our lives. He cares about every detail of our lives. He cares what you are experiencing today. And if the Shroud of Turin, of understanding the reality of that, if that helps you understand just a little bit more that Jesus is alive, not just because it's written in the Bible, but because it's true. And it's true because it's written in the Bible. Let's make that clear. I don't want any emails.
Yeah.
But I want you to like experience Jesus more in your day to day, and to understand more of, as Brian said, the love of Christ, that he experienced not just the shame of being nailed to the cross, but the shame of being nailed to the cross naked for all to see. This is God we're talking about.
Yeah.
So remember, it's about direction, not perfection. And when we get stuck on a perfection, we're never going to take the next step of curiosity, because when we're curious, it can lead to mocking. It can lead to other people judging us. I'm sure you've experienced that, Brian, that when we're curious and we explore things that maybe are not mainstream, it'll set you up for judgment. So stay curious, move in a direction of health in all 5 life domains, and put perfection aside. Again, we're going to have a webinar here in this Holy Week. The link to join us will be in the show notes, and if it's already passed, the link to the recording will be in the show notes as well. Brian, you are a rich blessing in my life, and I mean that in so many ways. We've known each other for a long time, and I just can't wait to continue to grow old and learn with you in the years to come.
Keep learning, baby.
Keep learning. So, to my Delay The Decay audience, we'll see you next time, and Brian, we'll see you around the corner.